The Fox and the Grapes. One day, as a fox was walking along, he spied a bunch of grapes hanging from a tree high off the ground. The grapes looked simply delicious, a big bunch of sweet, ripe grapes. The fox really wanted those grapes. So the fox tried to jump up to get the grapes, but he couldn't. They were too high up. So he tried again, this time with a running start, but he still couldn't reach them. They were still too high up. The fox really wanted those grapes. They looked so delicious. So once again he tried to get them. This time he got even further back for his running start, but still couldn't get them. The fox tried again and again and again, but each time he couldn't jump high enough. After a while he got very tired, and he looked at the grapes and said to himself, I bet they don't taste good anyway. They're probably terrible. They probably taste bitter. I really don't want those grapes anyway. What we learn from this is that if there is something that you really want and you try and still can't get that thing, don't criticize it and complain about it. Just accept it.
The birds, the beasts, and the bats. Once upon a time, there was a constant war between the creatures of the air, like the eagles, ducks, and other birds, and the creatures of the land, like the elephants, rabbits, and all animals big and small. And the war lasted a very, very long time. There was no peace or friendship between the two groups. It was a terrible struggle between them. Some say that the war started because the fox kept picking on the duck. The duck took it as long as she could and then just attacked the fox, and that's how it all started. Others say that it was all the owl's fault and the eagle's fault. The eagles would swoop down and pluck tiny rabbits and eat them, and the owls would swoop down on mice and eat them too. Regardless, this terrible war continued without an end in sight, and many rabbits, mice, birds, and ducks died during this terrible war. Now, where did the bats fit into this war between the beasts and the birds? Well, bats are not hatched from eggs like birds. No, they're born alive like the beasts. But bats have wings, and bats can fly. And those bats were clever. They'd watch the war between the birds and the beasts, and if it looked like the birds were winning the war, the bats would cheer for the birds. We're just like the birds. We want them to win. But if something happened and it looked like the beasts were winning, then the bats would change their tune. We're just like the beasts. We want them to win. The bats did this all the time. Well, finally, the birds and the beasts got together and talked about their problems, and there was peace. The war was over. But the birds and the beasts weren't sure what they should do with the fair-weather bats because they couldn't decide if they were birds or beasts. So all the beasts and the birds agreed that they should banish the bats forever, and they did. And the bats flew away to hide in deserted old buildings. During the daytime, they hide in fear. And at night, when it's dark, they fly out. But they're always watching for the birds and the beasts. What we learn from this is that those who lie and try to trick others soon have no friends.
The Cock and the Fox. One afternoon, just as the sun was setting, it was time for the rooster to fly up to the tree limb and cock-a-doodle-doo, the end of another day. Just as the rooster had finished and was ready to tuck his head under his wing for a good night's sleep, he noticed something moving down by the tree trunk. He looked again and saw it was a snout with a red fox attached to it. There was the fox looking so dapper. The rooster didn't trust the fox, but decided to see what the fox wanted. "Oh, friend rooster, I've come to tell you the most exciting news," the rooster said. "Really? What exciting news?" "Why, all the animals and the birds have all agreed to put an end to our petty squabbles and fights, and be friends with each other and live in peace from now on." "Oh, really? I'm happy to hear that. So, friend rooster, come down from your perch so I can hug you. Come on." "Well, of course. Wait. What's that I see coming in the distance?" The fox looked but couldn't see anything from the ground. "What is it? What do you see?" The rooster looked again and said, "Oh, just two dogs running as if they're chasing something, and they're coming this way." At that, the fox turned and started to run in the opposite direction. But the rooster said, "Wait, before you run away, didn't you say that all the animals and birds had agreed to live in peace and happiness from now on?" Yes, but I have many things I have to take care of right now." And with that, the fox took off. With a smile and a nod, the rooster tucked his head under his wing and went to sleep. What we learn from this is that those who try to fool others are easily fooled themselves. The fox without a tail. One day, a fox was happily walking along with his great bushy tail swishing back and forth in the air. The fox walked right past a trap, but he didn't notice it, and his tail got caught in the trap. The fox tried and tried everything he could think of to pull his tail free. Finally, he pulled and pulled and pulled, and he pulled his tail right off. The poor fox left his tail and ran away as fast as he could to his den. Soon, the little stump that was left from his tail healed. But the fox was worried that all the other foxes would make fun of him and laugh at him because he didn't have a tail. So, the fox decided to stay all by himself. But pretty soon the fox became lonely and wanted to be with the other foxes. So he thought and thought, and then he had an idea. He decided that he'd go to the foxes and get all of the foxes to listen to him. So, The fox without a tail went to the foxes' gathering place. All the foxes were there, all with huge, bushy tails. Some of the tails were waving in the breeze, others were standing straight in the air. The fox without a tail sat down and asked all the other foxes to listen to him. Then the fox without a tail said, "Brother and sister foxes, you know that I used to have a bushy tail like all of you. But now I have no tail." You might ask why. Well, my tail was just too heavy. I tried to run away from the hounds that were chasing me, but my heavy tail slowed me down and they bit my tail right off. So, I want to warn you to think twice about keeping your heavy tails. I'm sure you know that people don't hunt us for food. They only care about our tails. And really, those heavy tails are useless. I urge all of you to cut off your tails. When you do, we will be all alike, foxes without tails. All the other foxes were very quiet. They just looked at him. Finally, one of the old foxes asked the fox without a tail to stand up and turn around so everyone could see his backside. So, the fox without a tail stood up, slowly turned around and showed everyone the stump where his tail used to be. All the other foxes started chuckling and giggling and laughing and talking about the fox without a tail. The fox without a tail realized that despite all his talking, the other foxes laughed at him just the same. What we learn from this is that you shouldn't listen to someone who tries to make everyone equal by cutting them down to his level.
A long, long time ago, there were 3 billy goats. They were all brothers with the same last name, Gruff. The oldest brother was named George. The middle brother was named Jeffrey, and the youngest brother was named Gerald. Now, more than anything else, the 3 brothers wanted to go over to the mountainside and graze on the green grass and get fat. But between them and that snow-capped mountain, there was a river, and that meant they would have to cross over the bridge. But under that bridge lived a big, ugly troll. His eyes were as big and round as pie plates. And his nose was as long as a fireplace poker. That's who lived under the bridge. Well, anyway, Gerald, the youngest, was the first to go across the bridge. Trippity-trip, 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 trippity-trip. And that made the troll really mad. He jumped up and yelled, "Who's going trippity-trip on my bridge?" And Gerald, the youngest billy goat, said, It's me. I just want to go to the mountainside and eat grass and get fat. I'm gonna come up there and eat you up. That's what I'm going to do. Oh no, I'm just a little, small billy goat. You should wait for my brother Jeffrey. He's the middle brother. He's going to come after me, and he's bigger than I am. All right, get out. And so Gerald went trippity-trip over to the mountainside. After a while, Jeffrey, the middle brother, started across the bridge. Trappity-trap, trappity-trap, trappity-trap. And that made the troll really mad. He yelled, "Who's going trappity-trap on my bridge?" And Jeffrey, the middle billy goat, said, It's just me. I want to go to the mountainside and eat grass and get fat. Well, I'm going to come up there and eat you up. That's what I'm going to do. Oh no, I'm just a medium-sized billy goat. You should wait for my brother George, the oldest brother. He's going to come after a while, and he's much bigger than I am. All right, get out of here, said the troll. So Jeffrey went trappity-trap over to the mountainside. After a while, George, the oldest brother, started across the bridge. Trompety-tromp, trompety-tromp, trompety-tromp. He was so big and heavy that the whole bridge shook. And that made the troll furious. He yelled, "Who's going trompety-tromp on my bridge?" And George yelled back, "It's me, the biggest billy goat." Well, I'm going to come up there and eat you up. That's what I'm going to do. Well, all right then, come on, said George. I've got 2 big horns that'll go right through you. And I've got hooves that'll go trompety-tromp all over you and mash your bones. That's what I'm going to do. Well, the troll was really angry now, so he climbed to the top of the bridge, and then the biggest billy goat charged right at him. And when the troll saw those 2 big horns coming at him, he jumped off the bridge into the river and swam away. So George went trompety-tromp over to the mountainside, where the 3 billy goats ate and got fatter and fatter. They were so fat that when it was time to go back home, they waddled all the way. And that's the end of the story.
A long, long time ago, there was a husband and wife, newlyweds, who were very much in love. Now it happened that after a while, the wife became pregnant. They were going to have a baby. They lived in a cute little house with a tiny window in the back. From that window, the wife could look all around. In the back was a garden with fruit and vegetables growing in it. The wife would gaze longingly for hours at a special rare plant called Rapunzel that grew in that garden. "Husband, come here," the wife said. "You see that strange-looking plant, the Rapunzel? It's so delicious." "Oh, no, no," the husband said. "That garden belongs to an old witch who forbids anyone to go in the garden. She put a locked fence around it." The wife said she understood, but looked very sad and disappointed. And every day the wife would stand and look out her window at the Rapunzel. Her husband brought her all kinds of things to eat, but she didn't eat anything. As time went on, she got skinnier and skinnier, and the husband really began to worry about her. "You really want to eat some of that, Rapunzel?" he said. "Yes, I really do," she replied. So that night, when the wife went to bed, the husband went outside in the dark, carefully climbed over the fence and picked some of the Rapunzel and brought it home. The next morning, the husband prepared the Rapunzel and had it all ready when his wife got up. "Oh, thank you, I love you," she said, and her husband was a bit embarrassed. The wife ate the Rapunzel, and it was the most delicious thing that she had ever eaten in her life. In a couple of days, she had eaten it all up. And so once again, the wife would stand in front of the window, craving more Rapunzel. The husband knew his wife wanted more Rapunzel, so later that night, he went outside in the dark, carefully climbed over the fence, and ran right into the witch. "How dare you come into my garden and steal my food?" The husband apologized and tried to explain that his wife was pregnant, and she really had a craving for some Rapunzel. And the husband even offered to pay for the Rapunzel. But the witch refused. And then she said, "You'll have to give me the child in return for the Rapunzel." The husband was frightened because of the witch's spells and magic that could turn him into a frog or a monster. So he reluctantly agreed. When he went home, he said nothing to his wife. After several months, their baby was born, a cute little thing with beautiful flowing hair. One day there was a knock at the door. When the husband opened the door, there was the witch. She walked right in the house toward the baby, and the husband said, "She must have the baby, she must." The wife started to protest, but the witch cast a spell, took the baby, and disappeared. The husband and wife were heartbroken. Now the witch took very good care of the baby, changed its diapers and fed it. The little girl grew bigger and bigger and bigger. Her hair grew so fast, too. It was long and flowing. The witch named the little girl Rapunzel, just like the plant that grew in the garden. When Rapunzel was 12, the witch became concerned that someone would see how beautiful Rapunzel was and would marry her and take her away. So the witch built a tall tower with one little window in it, and using a tall wooden ladder, put Rapunzel in the tower. Then the witch got rid of the ladder and left Rapunzel all alone. Every day the witch would visit Rapunzel and bring her food, and the witch would yell out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And sure enough, Rapunzel would throw down her long braided hair. Then the witch would use her hair as a rope and climb up into the tower. The witch would feed Rapunzel and talk with her, and then leave. She did the same thing every single day. One day, a handsome prince on a white horse was out riding along when he noticed the tall tower. The prince wondered what it was, so he rode over to the tower. There he saw a beautiful girl singing and signing to herself in the tower window. The prince thought that she was so beautiful, and her eyes sparkled. And then the prince noticed the witch, and he hid. As usual, the witch came up and said, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The prince was puzzled and looked at the witch. Then suddenly long braided hair came tumbling out of the window, and the witch climbed right up. Now the prince really wanted to meet the beautiful girl in the tower. After a while, the witch climbed back down and left. Then Rapunzel pulled her hair back into the tower. The prince decided this was his chance. He changed his voice a bit and yelled, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel was startled, but she threw down her hair. As he climbed up into the braids, the prince noticed how soft Rapunzel's hair was. When he got to the window, Rapunzel was shocked to see the prince. She had never seen a man before, and the prince was so good-looking and handsome. Rapunzel blushed and her eyes sparkled. Rapunzel and the prince talked and talked and talked. The prince asked Rapunzel why she was kept in the tower and how she got here. And when the prince said that he wanted to take Rapunzel away from the tower, Rapunzel said that she wanted to go with him. So they tried to figure out how they could get Rapunzel down from the tower. Then the prince had an idea. He would come to visit Rapunzel every day, and every day he would bring a handkerchief. Rapunzel would tie the handkerchiefs together and make a rope that they could climb down. So that's what they decided to do, and Rapunzel promised not to say anything to the witch. Then the prince left, but every day he came back. He would wait until the witch left, then he would climb up into the tower, and every day he would bring a handkerchief, and soon the rope was almost long enough. Now all this while, the witch thought that Rapunzel had been acting rather strangely. She used to be so sad and pale, but now she was beaming, and her eyes sparkled. The witch definitely suspected something. So one day, after the witch left the tower, she hid and watched Rapunzel. Sure enough, as soon as the witch left, the prince arrived and yelled, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel threw down her hair, and the prince climbed up. When the witch saw that, she was furious. The next day, she was prepared to take care of this situation. The witch arrived and yelled, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." The witch slowly climbed up Rapunzel's hair. As soon as she got into the tower, the witch grabbed Rapunzel's hair and cut it off. The witch threw Rapunzel down, tied one end of the hair to the tower, and waited for the prince. When the prince arrived, he was excited because he knew that he and Rapunzel would be running away soon. He yelled, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Down came the long braided hair, and up climbed the prince. As soon as he got into the tower, he saw the witch. The witch was so mad, she pushed the prince right out of the window. The prince fell down into some rose bushes, and was blinded by the thorns. The witch took Rapunzel to a far-away island. "You will stay here all alone. That is your punishment for disobeying me. You will stay here alone forever." And with that, the witch left. Rapunzel sat by herself, sad and lonely. Meanwhile, the prince who had been blinded by the thorns refused to give up. He had to find Rapunzel, his true love. He wandered around searching and searching for Rapunzel. Day after day he searched, and day after day he wandered closer to the faraway island. One day, as Rapunzel sat all alone, she saw the prince wandering toward her. Rapunzel ran to greet him. And as they hugged, Rapunzel noticed that the prince was blind, and she began to cry. When Rapunzel's tears washed the prince's eyes, suddenly he was well and could see again. They looked at each other and embraced and escaped together. Soon after, they were married and lived happily ever after. A long time ago, there was a king who had 12 beautiful daughters. Now, the daughters all slept in one huge room with 2 rows of beds in it, 6 beds in each row, and the princess's shoes placed at the foot of their beds. Now, every night, the king would go in and say good night to his daughters. Really, what he said was good night, good night, good night, good night, good night, good night, good night. And then he would close the door, lock up tight, and put the key in his pocket. The next morning, the king would unlock the door and look in. And every morning, the same thing would happen. The princesses' shoes at the foot of their beds were all worn out. The king wondered how this was possible. Now, the princesses wouldn't tell their father, the king, anything. And the king wondered what to do. And then he had a brilliant idea. The king issued a proclamation that any man in his kingdom was welcome to spend 3 nights in a row observing the princesses very carefully to determine how the shoes at the foots of their beds got all worn out. And whoever discovered the secret could pick one of the daughters for his bride, plus the king would make that man the heir to his throne. When the proclamation was issued, many men were anxious to try. But the king explained that if, after the 3rd night, the man did not discover the secret, the man must die. Well, of course, now there weren't as many men ready to try. Finally, one by one, a number of brave men were willing to try, and one by one they failed to discover the secret. And one by one, they died. No one could discover the secret of the worn-out shoes. After a while, a soldier heard of the king's proclamation and decided to try his luck, so he decided to go to the kingdom. The soldier began to walk toward the kingdom. Through the forest he walked when suddenly he saw an old woman, a pauper in need of money. The kind-hearted soldier was touched and gave the woman some money. The old woman was so impressed with his generosity that after thanking him, she said, "And where might you be going?" After the soldier told her the whole story of the proclamation, the old woman said, "Let this be a warning to you. Be careful, because the princesses will try to give you drugged wine. Be sure not to drink it." "Yes, yes, of course," said the soldier. "And I have a special cloak for you," said the old woman. "When you wear this magical cloak, you become invisible." "Why, 1,000 thanks to you," said the soldier as he took the cloak, folded it up, and put it in his knapsack. And then the soldier took his leave and went to the king's castle. When he got there, he knocked on the door and was shown in by the king's servants. They dressed the soldier in the finest of clothes and led him into a small room next to the princess's bedroom to sit and wait. The oldest of the 12 daughters entered first. "Here, I thought you might like a goblet of wine to help you relax before you go to sleep." "Why, surely," said the soldier as he took the goblet. But when the princess looked away, the soldier threw the wine on the floor. When she looked back at him, the soldier pretended to drink from the goblet. "Good night," she said, as she winked at the soldier, closed the door, and left. Then she ran and told her sisters that the soldier drank the wine. All the princesses were so excited because they had planned to leave their room later that night and go out dancing. The princesses waited a while and then went to make sure the soldier was asleep. And when they looked in his room, sure enough, the soldier was sound asleep. Of course, he was just pretending. Now, when the princesses closed the door, the soldier got up, took out his magical cloak, and put it on, and became invisible. He crept out of his room, where he saw the excited princesses all dressed up, putting their shoes on and getting ready to go out. Then, when they were all ready and all lined up, the oldest daughter went over to her bed and knocked 3 times on her headboard. Bang, 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 and then the bed lowered slowly into the floor, and there were some steps leading down.
The 12 princesses, all in a line, walked down the steps, and the invisible soldier got right in line and followed right behind them. Down they went through the secret passageway, and along the path the soldier saw trees with leaves made of silver shimmering in the night. As the oldest daughter looked back at her sisters, she thought she saw something peculiar. But she went on. It was the soldier who reached up and quickly plucked a silver leaf and hid it under his cloak. On they went, and soon they came to another passageway, but now the trees had leaves made of gold. This time several of the princesses looked back and thought they saw something peculiar, but they went on. It was the soldier who reached up and quickly plucked a golden leaf and hid it under his cloak. On they went, and soon they came to another passageway, but now the trees had clusters of diamonds on them. Again, several of the princesses looked back and thought they saw something peculiar, but they went on. It was the soldier who reached up and plucked a diamond cluster from the tree and hid it under his cloak. On they went, and soon they came to an underground river. At the edge of the river were 12 boats, each with a very handsome oarsman on it. The princesses ran to the boats, and one by one got in their boats. The soldier got in one of the boats, and the princess wondered why her boat suddenly began to rock. But since she couldn't see anything, she ignored it, and the 12 boats, all in a line, set out down the underground river. Soon they came to the underground entrance to a fortress, and as they entered, the soldier heard the sounds of music and people dancing. One by one, the princesses got out of their boats and began to join the dancing. Since no one could see him, the soldier decided that he too would join the dancing, and for a little bit of fun, he stepped on people's toes. They danced all night until the sun began to rise, and then the oldest daughter told her sisters, "Hurry, it's time to go home." So one by one, the princesses got back in their boats with the soldier barely climbing into the last boat. Again, the princess wondered why her boat suddenly began to rock. But since she couldn't see anything, she ignored it, and the 12 boats, all in a line, set out for home. Back up the passageways they went to the secret stairway, up the stairs, and into their beds. The soldier hurried to a small room, took off his cape, and exhausted, went to sleep. The 12 princesses sat on their beds, rubbing their sore feet and taking off their worn-out shoes. The oldest princess then went to check on the soldier. Wonderful, she thought, as she looked in the soldier's room. He's been asleep this whole time and doesn't suspect a thing. It's a shame he has to die, but such is life. And she went to bed. The next morning, the princesses got up and said nothing to the king all day. That night, the second night, the princess again gave the soldier some drugged wine, and again he didn't drink it, but threw it away. And again they went dancing. And the third night was the same. Now, on the morning after the third night, the king called the 12 daughters, and he called the soldier. "Now," said the king, "have you discovered the secret?" As the 12 princesses looked smugly at the king, the soldier said, "Yes, your majesty, I have." The princesses looked with disbelief at the soldier. Then the soldier proceeded to explain everything to the king, the secret passageways, the boat ride on the underground river, and the dancing. "Impossible," said the princesses. "He's lying. It's preposterous." "I can show you proof," the soldier said. "A silver leaf? A golden leaf? And a diamond cluster," he said, and pulled each one from his coat. The princesses were stunned, but the king was thrilled. "My son," said the king, "you may choose any of my daughters to be your bride." The soldier thought for a moment and chose the oldest daughter because, like him, she was the oldest and the wisest. And so they were wed. Years later, the old king passed away, and the soldier became the new king. And he and his queen lived happily ever after.